I'm John McQuay with 8541 Tactical, and this is Mail Call Mondays, the show that answers your questions about precision rifles, optics, and equipment. Welcome to another Mail Call Mondays, and as you can tell, our shop is a little bit of a wreck. I've been scrambling to get ready for the Oregon Sniper Challenge, which I will depart for that Wednesday. The OSC is actually next weekend, and we're traveling here from southern Indiana all the way out to Oregon, and for some reason I had an attack of insanity and decided to drive this year. Usually I will fly to the OSC, but I've just gotten tired of trying to drag along all that gear. When you have two people going, then it's kind of a wash. This year Sarah's not going to be able to go with me out to the OSC, but my dad is accompanying me out there, so that ought to be a great time. But we are driving, and so it's really causing me to crunch to try to get some last minute prep going before we go out there. I talked to you last week about the rifle that I'd be taking out there, the proof barrel equipped Accuracy International AT, and currently it has a Vortex Razor Gen 1 scope on it. We ended up getting a brand new Kahles K624i in this last week. Now, I don't even have the mount for the scope yet. The mount is actually supposed to be showing up sometime today. We're filming this on a Monday. Hopefully you'll be able to see this on a Monday. So I don't know if this will actually make it out to the Oregon Sniper Challenge or not, because I generally have a thing about changing equipment on a rig right before a match, especially a large match like the Oregon Sniper Challenge. So I don't know if the Kahles will actually get on that rifle before we head out. I will probably still run the Razor, but we're going to give it a shot. I still got a couple of days before I go out, so if I can get it on the rifle and do some tracking tests to make sure everything rocks, then it may be on there. Now, this scope is really interesting. Of course, it's a 6-24 power first focal plane scope, so the reticle is in the first focal plane, and it has a new reticle called the SKMR, and that stands for Shannon K Mill Reticle, and it was designed in cooperation with Shannon K down at K&M Precision, and it's really nice because it has a really well marked vertical and horizontal stadia line on the reticle itself, and then off of the vertical stadia line it has windage hold marks, which for me, I'm primarily a hold shooter. I really like that. I will rarely ever dial for wind, and a lot of the time I am holding for elevation instead of dialing for elevation, so that works out great. A couple of other really nice things about the K624i is that the parallax is right under the elevation turret. This is the parallax adjustment right here. Now, what that allows me to do is when I'm actually on the scope and I'm using my support hand to support the back of the rifle, I can come up with my shooting hand and I can adjust that parallax, I can adjust the windage, I can adjust whatever. The windage also is on the right hand side of the scope. So when I'm actually peering through the scope, I can see where the windage is at with my shooting eye without having to bobble around or do any craziness here. We have the elevation where it normally is at, but the elevation also has a second rev indicator on the top, and we actually have 14 mils of elevation on one turn, and then we drop on to the second rev, and this little red indicator up here pops up to tell me when I'm one rev off, which again is really nice. And we do have a zero stop, so we can't go under zero wherever we set that stop at. And of course on the windage, we've got 7 mils in either direction of windage. And unfortunately, fortunately, on this one you can't go a full turn off on your windage. And actually we've got 5.8 indicated on that side and 5.5 indicated on that side. So when we actually get the windage dialed in and zeroed out, we'll have to see how well that works. The magnification ring moves nice and smoothly. It does have a fast focus eyepiece with one of these great big huge grippy rings to adjust it. That is something that I'm not a big fan of, because a lot of times when you slide a scope cap on here, then you can have problems with bumping that scope cap and causing your diopter adjustment to turn. So what I generally do on these kind of scopes with the big European fast focus eyepiece is, once I get it dialed in for my eye, I will take electrical tape and I'll make a couple of wraps of electrical tape around it before I stick the scope cap on, and that will generally keep the adjustment from turning. Now, it ends up when you pull it off, you've got electrical tape goo to clean off. But I'd rather have that than have my diopter adjustment all over the place. Now, this does have an illuminated reticle, and the reticle adjustment is here on the side. It really has a nice solid positive detent when it turns off. We will see if we have any problems with that turning on or off, coming in and out of the bag or being moved around. But overall, I am really anxious to get this on a rifle and give it a run in and see how well it works. If we are not able to get it on the AT before the Oregon Sniper Challenge, then we will probably put this scope on the 6.5 Creedmoor project, because that will more than likely be the rifle that I take down to the Guardian Long Range shoot at Woody's in September. So we'll see how that works out for us. I don't know that we're going to have the scope for a very long time, so we're going to try to get knocked out and see what information we can get you guys on it. So if you have any questions on the K624i, please leave them in the comment section below, and we will try to get to them when we do the review. Now let's talk about what I really wanted to talk about this week, and that is cold bore tracking or cold bore shots. We got a lot of comments on our Facebook and Instagram feed this last week as I was posting pictures of our cold bore tracking with the AT and the proof barrel. I think there are a lot of people out there that don't understand what a cold bore shot is or what the purpose of cold bore tracking is. Now, a cold bore shot, generally when I'm referring to a cold bore shot, that is the first shot out of that rifle on that day. If we're talking about a cold bore shot in an operational aspect or a cold bore shot for competition, then it is usually the first shot for both the rifle and the shooter. So you have two components to it. You have a cold rifle and a cold shooter. Now, temperature really doesn't make a difference here. It doesn't matter if it's 91 degrees or 0 degrees. When we say cold bore, it's the first bullet through the bore of the rifle on that shooting day. When we say cold shooter, it's the first bullet the shooter fires on that shooting day. So if you shoot one shot in the morning and you come back in the afternoon, that's not necessarily a cold bore shot for the purpose of cold bore tracking or for the purpose of a cold bore stage in a competition. Now, when we track cold bore, we need to make sure that we have a consistent bore condition. You'll hear cold bore referred to a lot of times, and then you'll hear another thing called clean cold bore or cold clean bore. The cold clean bore shot will be the first shot through that barrel since it was cleaned. The cold bore shot is just the first shot of the day. You need to make sure that you see that differentiation when you are doing these tracking drills, because it's important to know where your cold clean bore shots will hit, but it's very important to know where your cold bore shots will hit, and there can be a difference. This is why I recommend to professional snipers, law enforcement snipers, that they actually do keep a fouled bore, that if they have to clean their rifle, they need to go out and shoot 10 to 20 shots to foul that bore out so that it is the most consistent that it will be. Usually law enforcement snipers will only have 1 to 2 shots, so you need to have that first shot be your most accurate shot. And this goes counter to what a lot of law enforcement trainers will tell you. A lot will want you to clean your weapon after every time you fire it, because if there's any legal question as to who fired, they will go collect the weapons and they will check for residue in the weapons. And it may be a couple of days until they check for residue. So if you shot your gun 2 days ahead of time, then there's a question, they collect your gun. When they check your gun, obviously it's going to have fresh firing residue in it, so that may be a problem. With law enforcement snipers, it's a little bit different, and again, that's why I recommend that you leave your bore fouled if you're a law enforcement sniper. So when we do our cold bore tracking, we want to mark down in our data book if the shot we are firing is a cold clean shot or if it's just a cold shot. Now when we do cold bore tracking, the way I do cold bore tracking to minimize variables is I will go out, I'll set a target at 100 yards with a very precise aiming point on it. You can do cold bore tracking at a greater distance. In some instances, if you're getting ready for a specific stage at a match, then it may be a good idea to do cold bore at a greater distance to train yourself. But just for tracking for the rifle, we want to do it where there's going to be a minimum of environmental factors. So 100 yards is a good spot. Now you're going to come back, you're going to set the rifle up. You're going to do this on your maximum magnification because you want to be as precise with your sight picture as you possibly can. Get your parallax dialed in, make sure you move your head around behind it to get that parallax really zeroed out. Don't just trust the marks on the side of your scope. And then I recommend you do 10 to 20 dry fires just to make sure you're in a really solid position, you're feeling good, you're warmed up, you're ready to go. Load a magazine with 2 rounds. Then you're going to get as long as you need to fire that first round. Fire the first round as perfectly as you can possibly fire it. Now if you look through your scope and you can see where that first round impacted while you're on the gun, then that's fine. Just remember where that shot was at. Go ahead and bolt up the second round and fire your follow-up shot. Look down range, see where your follow-up shot's at, then mark those down in your data book. Now if you have a lower magnification scope or the mirage is really kicking or something to the effect that you can't actually see your shot holes in your paper at 100 yards, then after you fire that first shot, you're going to want to stand up, go down range, mark your cold bore shot on your paper, come back without any sight adjustments, get down and fire that follow-up shot. And what we're looking for, ideally, the cold bore and the follow-up shot should be right on top of each other. We shouldn't have any real deviation between the two. If they're starting to egg out the hole a little bit, that's fine as long as we are within the mechanical accuracy of the rifle. We don't want to have a great big variation between the two because that may be an indicator of a problem. We don't want to make a sight adjustment between the two because that's going to throw our test off. Now also, when you're shooting, you want to call your shot. So before you look and grade that shot or see where it's at on the paper, as soon as the shot breaks, you should know if that was a good shot, if that you put all you had into that shot or not. If it was a bad shot, you're going to mark that down in your data book, then you're going to look, you're going to diagnose why it was a bad shot, what you did, but your cold bore tracking is blown for that day. That shot is not going to give you any information for the gun at all, so you just totally discount it. You may want to mark it down in your data book still, but you're going to write down that you blew the shot or whatever you did to throw that shot off. You can go ahead and fire your follow-up shot, but it's not going to give you the data that you need. Now, once you've got that information down, you're going to go ahead and do whatever other shooting drills you're going to do for the day, etc. If you have to make a sight adjustment throughout the day, no matter what else you're doing, you're going to want to make sure you mark that sight adjustment down in your data book, because when you go fire your cold bore on the next day, that is going to cause that cold bore shot to impact in a different spot, and you're going to need to make sure you account for that. So make sure you note any dope adjustments, any sight adjustments in your data book so that you can refer back to them when you make the next cold bore shot. Now, what's the cold bore tell us? Well, the cold bore alone doesn't tell us a whole lot. It can cause all kinds of issues with questions in your mind, but the cold bore and the follow-up will give us an idea of if there's something wrong with the gun, if the gun is shifting between that first and second shot. There can be action screw torque issues that will allow the action to relax in the stock while it's sitting in the safe, and then when you fire that first shot, it loads the action, so between the first shot and the follow-up, you'll have a different point of impact. You can have debris in the barrel channel that's messing with your free float that can cause a difference between the first and the second shot. You can have some bedding issues, barrel bedding issues, action bedding issues that will string shots between the first shot and the last shot. But generally, if you will see a deviation, say your cold bore shot is high left, and then all the rest of the shots you shoot the rest of the day are dead center, just drilling holes in them, you may really want to take a look at the shooter. It may be a cold shooter issue where you weren't mentally prepared for that first shot, and then all the rest of the shots, you're good to go. Usually if you have one shot over here and all the rest through the center, it's going to be a shooter issue. It can be a torque issue, it can be a scope issue, but a lot of times it's really a shooter issue, and the way to diagnose that is bring another rifle out. Shoot another rifle first before you do your cold bore tracking, and then shoot the rifle you're doing the cold bore tracking on. And if it's a cold shooter issue, usually you will see that resolved. Now, there can be heat stringing issues, but that will usually not be evident in that first cold bore or the follow-up shot. What will happen there is you will start on the outside of your intended point of impact, and as the day goes on, the shots, or as the gun heats up, the shots will come back onto center. So if what you see at the end of a shooting day, you make a sight adjustment, you're just dead on, your rifle's zeroed perfectly, and then you come back the next day and you fire it and it's off, but as you shoot, it comes back on, that could be a heat issue. That could be the bore heating up and the rifle stringing shots back to where they need to be. So the cold bore tracking can help you diagnose a few things. Cold bore and the first stage of fire that you do on your training day can really help. So when you go out to shoot, I recommend making your first couple of stages on your training days, paper stages, so you can see what the gun's doing. Once you have a gun that you absolutely know how it performs on paper, you don't need to do the paper stages. You can roll right into barricade shooting or something of that nature. But when we're getting acquainted with a new gun like I am with the AT and the proof barrel right now, it's important to do a lot of paperwork so you can see what the gun is doing and you can see how you're reacting to the gun as well. So that's a little bit on cold bore tracking and how I do cold bore tracking. I have had guns that have had a cold bore deviation when you remove them from the chassis and put them back in the chassis, and then it seems for the first couple of sessions it takes a little while for them to seat back in. I have had guns that have just been totally crazy, and those we generally end up tearing apart and rebuilding. Don't discount scope issues. Scope issues can do some really weird things. So if you start seeing some strange things that you can't explain, you really want to swap a known good scope onto your rifle and check that out. Because that can play hell with cold bore tracking, that can play hell with anything else that you do on paper if your scope goes crazy. So make sure you grab a known good, high quality scope, borrow one from somebody if you don't have an extra one, throw it on your rifle and give that a go. Another really important thing, should go without saying, but while you're doing cold bore tracking, you want to use the same lot of ammunition if you're using factory ammunition, or you need to use the same group of hand loads. So if you're like me and you'll load a 100-round box of hand loads in one setting, you need to use all of them out of that 100-round box instead of switching between different ones. And you obviously do not want to switch between different grains of bullets and different powders, because those result in different harmonics in the barrel. Well, that's all we have for this Mail Call Mondays. I know it's a bit of a short Mail Call Mondays, but as I said, that's because we're getting ready for the Oregon Sniper Challenge, and because of the OSC, there will not be a Mail Call Mondays next weekend. We will actually be in the car driving back from Oregon, so I won't be able to get an episode out to you guys. Hopefully I will be able to take some photos and some videos at the OSC, but no promises. The range is in a different location this time, or actually the competition's on a different range this time. So I'm not sure how it's going to be laid out, and we have to carry all the gear we need for the entire day. So I'll have to lug anything that I want to use to shoot video or photo around with me, and I have a feeling I'm going to have enough of a hard time just staying hydrated while we're out there in the high desert. So we'll get what we can, we'll come back, and we'll tell you how the Oregon Sniper Challenge went the week after next. So make sure you look forward to that. If you have any questions over anything that we've covered, leave them in the comment section below or send them to us on Facebook or Twitter. And make sure you like, share, and subscribe. Until next time, get out and shoot.